Okay, so when we last left our hero, we mean the human being seeking perfection, we had read the Rambams on Lishmah and Lishmah. So we're not going to reread everything, but we will reread this first halacha because that was where we started in Hilchos Talmud Torah Gimel Hey. The beginning of a person's din, his judgment is only on learning, and then afterwards on the rest of his actions. Therefore, the Chachamim said, a person should always be involved in Torah, even not for its own sake, because from doing it for its own, not for its own sake, he'll come to do it for its sake. So our first question is, what does it mean that it was that you're judged on your actions first? And there we said that, or I give you the analogy of the college application and said that if the guidance counselor says the first thing they're going to look at is your SAT scores, that means that there is a practical prioritizing of it. And that the Rambam is saying that practically speaking, you should prioritize it here. Not that it's the first thing you're judged on, because that doesn't make sense in the sense, the din in Olam Haba doesn't happen in time. So there's no first and second. And if it really were about the metaphysical reality about din, he would really put it in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Gimel. This is in the Perek about acquiring Torah. So it sounds like this is going to have a practical ramification. So it sounds like he's saying you should focus primarily on Talmud. We supplemented that by saying Talmud maybe l'dei Maisa, v'ein Maisa maybe l'dei Talmud, which the Rambam is not referencing explicitly here, but we said it follows that, you know, that from that and from Talmud Torah K'neged Kulam, that really that's the thing to prioritize, and your other actions will come from that. But then the question was the lefikach. How does that segue into you should mitoch shelo lishma ba'al lishma? And I don't think any of us said this last time, but I was thinking about it. It's funny because he's saying because of your din, then you should be involved in Torah shelo lishma, should mitoch shelo lishma ba'al lishma. The funny thing is that again, if you take it in the literal sense, the tchilas dina shel adam, the person who's involved in it lishma is not going to be caring about his din. So just a little irony, you know. Again, we said that it doesn't have to actually do with din, but our question was like, what is the connection between the first sentence in that halacha and the second sentence of the dino shel adam, and then the therefore you should be involved in the shelo lishma? Shouldn't you be involved in the shelo lishma anyway? Like shemitoch shelo lishma ba'al lishma, like that principle stands on its own, you know. And then again, and later on in Hilchos Tshuva, he says it's the highest level. If this is the only way to get to lishma, why is he making it here contingent on tchilas dino shel adam? Yeah. Right. Right. Correct. Right. Right. Okay. So that, I think that's a good building off of what we said last time, because last time we said that I think I quoted the other chazal that says like anyone who is involved in Torah. Oh, sorry, I don't even need to quote that. Last time I think we said that really the only valued learning is lishma. The rest of it is not valuable. So what Chaim's saying now is you might think that since the learning you're doing is not really valuable if it's not lishma, whereas the masim you're doing are valuable, then you might think that you should either prioritize the action or not strive for the learning if it's not lishma. You know, you could also say another analogy here, like people do make the argument that in certain areas, then let's say like learning how to play piano, then there's value depending on how far you get. But there's certain other things, like people will say like, you know, don't strive to become a gold medal Olympic athlete or a ballet dancer. Ballet dancer is a better example, because ballet dancing, like you have to do it all day and like you destroy your body in the process, you know, or football, professional football, you know, like in the NFL, like if you're not going to make it, if there's no chance of making it to the top, there's no point in like striving for the professional route, you know? So you could make the argument here also that since lishma is the only valuable learning in the ultimate sense, then if you're not doing it lishma, then what's the point? And he's answering that by saying, yeah, you should do it shelo lishma, because that is the only hope you have of getting to lishma. And there's apparently enough hope that you have of getting to lishma that like it's reasonable to engage in it. Like I don't think we say this, for example, about nevuah. We don't say you should always like strive to work on trying to become a navi because maybe you'll get there one day. Like, like it might be true, but it's not true. Like it might, there's a remote possibility, but it is within people's grasp. Yeah. Okay. So then we went to Chelek. So maybe we could still get this better, but because I still don't feel like I see the connection between the two halves. But yeah, okay. But then we went to Chelek. So he had the mashal about the kid learning. Then he said, with the candy and then the shoes and then clothing, then the money and then the kavod, and then all of this is despicable, but we need to do it because of the frailty of the human psyche, who makes the purpose of learning something other than learning itself. And then he defines Lishmah. He says, the only purpose of learning to you should be to learn the knowledge alone. The only purpose of truth is to know that it is true. And the mitzvahs are true. And therefore the mitzvahs are true, and therefore their purpose is their fulfillment. That's defining Lishmah by learning and Lishmah by mitzvahs. And he says, a perfected person wouldn't say, if I do these mitzvahs that Hashem commanded me, or if I don't do these affairs, what will God give me? Because that's like the kid who doesn't see the value in the learning. He only sees the value in the candy, and he is mavakish latachlis. He looks for an end for the end. I mean, really, there should be an end in itself, but he's making the end into a means to another end. And he says, we answer him according to his foolishness by telling him, oh yeah, learn so you can get the candy. Then he brings a bunch of rayas, a bunch of proofs that this is the case. And then he says, so it's clear that this is the purpose of the mitzvahs and the foundation of the emunas chachamim. And the only one who will miss out on this is a total fool who's naive, a simpleton who's been blinded by fantasies and imaginations. And then he says, but since the chachamim knew that not everyone is going to get this, and it's not going to seem true at the first glance, then they encouraged people to serve God with the intent to receive reward, and they allowed the Hamon to like operate on that basis, and they encouraged them about this until they get to the level where they know it. So our question was, first of all, what is the idea of Lishmah, of intaklis emes aladashu emes, and what does it mean? What are mitzvos Lishmah? Those are just two basic questions. But then the question was like, what exactly was their policy about the Hamon? Did they think the Hamon could get it or not? Is the only one who misses out on this a total fool, or do most people miss out on this? How do we reconcile these two, conflicting attitudes towards the average person? Yeah. So I guess we have to start with the Lishmah itself, right? And you also, the way you asked it was on the mashal of the kid he said that the kid doesn't realize the benefit of the perfection that he gets from it, and you were saying, well, what exactly is the perfection you get from it, or what makes that good? Like, just to say it's self-evident or it's good in its own right is not really an answer, Yeah. So what is Lishmah? That's the question. Yeah.
Viewing it as a goal.
Viewing it as a goal. Is that Lishmah, or is that davka shelo Lishmah because you're doing it as a goal?
That's in Lishmah where it's a means to a different goal.
A means to a different goal. That's definitely shelo Lishmah, right? But if I'm saying, but let's say like is saying it's a goal. What does that mean exactly? Like, is that just a description? Right. Right, because that's what Lishmah means, for its sake, right? It is the goal, yeah. But I mean, right. Right. Yeah, I don't think you can ask that question though, right? Because isn't that making learning into a means to something else? Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. So right. Yeah. So this is the problem when you're talking about value systems, right? I think we touched on this last time, but just to restate it again, is that every value system is going to have like things that are good because they're a means, and then things that are good as ends in themselves. And by definition, you can't, there's going to be something that is the end of everything that you can't say, well, what makes that good, right? Is what? Shalem was Adam, right? Right. Right. Well, didn't we kind of do that in when we went over the Rambam in the beginning of the פירוש המשניות about the purpose of man? Right. I mean, let's just look at that again. Hold on. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, this is going to come down to the perfection of, or to what man is, like Chaim was just saying, that when he says that that when the philosophers investigated, this is in the Hakdama to the פירוש המשניות, when they investigated the various activities that man can do, they said that man's end, his purpose, is one activity alone. And that all of man's other actions are only there to sustain his existence so that he can perfect that activity. And that is apprehension of concepts and knowledge of truths clearly. And then he says that you can't say that the purpose of man is to eat, drink, have sex, or to build a house, or to be a king. All these are just accidental things that don't add to his essence. And then he gave one more statement, that man's all of those other actions are man has in common with the other animals. But learning, knowledge, concepts bring man from potential man to actual man, right? So that's saying basically that your purpose is whatever your essence is, and the thing that, again, not proving this from outside of Torah, but the way that the Torah says it is the thing that makes man is the Tzalma Elokim, and he was created b'Tzalmo Kidmuso, that man has the ability to seek knowledge, abstract conceptual knowledge for its own sake, and to act based on that knowledge, So that is the definition of man. And so well, this depends on how you define Demus Elokim, right? I mean, I was just quoting my favorite definition, which is the Sforno, saying that Demus Elokim is free will, but that's not according to everyone. But everyone holds that the Tzalma Elokim is knowledge. But Rambam would ultimately agree with that also, even though he doesn't say that the that's what again. Well, the way that the Rambam puts it at the end of the Mor Nevuchim is it's not enough to just know Yidiyas Hashem, but that actually has to affect your actions. You have to emulate God based on that, So that's why I think even the Rambam would agree with that, even if he doesn't interpret the word. Yeah. I would say that it's a lack of Yidiyas Hashem. Yeah. Yeah. Really, the essence is knowledge of God. I would say that the essence or the reason, if a person has knowledge of God and is not acting on it, then what's wrong with that essentially is that it's not knowledge of God. It's lacking in knowledge of God. And I think the proof of that, and maybe you could say that this takes into a whole other direction. A whole other direction is like, we can't act in line with our knowledge of God in Olam Haba, right? All we have is knowledge of God, So you can't say that the purpose, what? According to the Rambam, yeah, this is Rambam Bekius. But according to the Rambam, you can't say that the purpose of knowledge of God is to act on it, because then God's depriving us of our purpose when we die, right? So rather, action seems to be more of like a barometer for Yidiyas Hashem, and also action sustains like doing chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat sustains a world in which human beings in general can pursue knowledge of God. So it's good for the system as well.
Well, I can understand why it's not easy for the Talmud.
Yeah, right.
It's like you that it's not exactly
Right. Well, so that's okay. Maybe let's frame the question that way. What makes this hard for the Hamon to understand? Because the way he said it is, he said, let's just reread his words here. He says that Lufishi Yadu Chachamim Alehem Mashalom. This is back in Chelek. Since the Chachamim knew Kashim Od, that this idea is very difficult. In Kol Adam Yachal Hasigo, not every person can understand it. Yim Yasigenu, and if he understands it, Lo Yashar Be'inav Iyun Rishon. He will not. It will not seem right in his eyes at first glance. Lo Yira Lo Shehu Dasamitis, and it won't, or Lo Yira Lo, it won't seem to him to be a true opinion. Lefi, now why is it not going to seem true? Lefi shedarach adam lo yase maase ela lahasig bo toelas olihimane limno nezek. That is that a person only acts in order to achieve a benefit or to prevent a harm. V'im lav har yihu masav levatala, and if not, his actions would be in vain. Ve'ech efshar lomar latorani asem masim elu ba'al tasem lo miras onesh Hashem v'lo l'tikvas gumulo. How can you say to a Torah Jew, do these actions and don't do these actions out of fear of punishment or for hope of reward? Zeh kashma od. Because this is very difficult. Not every person can apprehend the truth and be like Avram Avinu. So so on the one hand, he's saying, I mean, what he's directly saying is he's saying, it's going to sound to the average person like when you're talking about Lishmah, you're talking about doing something without getting any benefit or without getting any punishment for not doing it. And that sounds like an action that's levatala, that's arbitrary. What you're saying, which I'm not saying is unrelated, but the way you're framing it is people have a hard time grasping the concept of truth for its own sake, and the nafkamina, I think, is like this. And I'm borrowing Mortimer Adler's summary of Aristotle's statement, which is, he said, happiness, I think Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics says, happiness is like the end towards which all of our other actions are means. And the way Mortimer Adler paraphrases, he says, no one can fill in the blank in this following sentence. I want to be happy because blank. Because if you try to fill in the blank, let's say I want to be happy so that I can, I don't know, like whatever it is, I could just say, well, why do you want to do that? Ultimately, it's going to get down to I want to be happy as an end in its own right, So the reason why I'm bringing this in now is it's funny because I'd say right now I'm more inclined to agree with you, Chaim, that people have a concept of an end in and of itself. Like anyone, you can tell that thing I just said about happiness to everyone, and people say, yeah, okay, fine. There's this thing called happiness, which is an end in and of itself. And however I conceive of it, like there's going to have to, it can't be turtles all the way down. There's going to have to be something that I am doing as an end in itself. And the reason why they can't get Lishmah is because they can't relate to the idea of pursuing knowledge for its own sake. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. Yeah. But is that what the Rambam is saying? Sounds like he's saying people can't get the idea of doing something not for a benefit or to remove a harm. Unless you're going to say, right.
Is doing it whether essence of hell or heaven?
Yeah, right. Yeah, specifically in terms of right punishment and reward. And that's the other thing also, what Yosef is mentioning with the
Is that not understanding the argument? They don't see that as a one.
Right. Yeah. In other words, so I was going to circle around to a similar point, which is when the Rambam says toelis and nezek, I think he means physical toelis and nezek. And when I say physical, I mean like in this world, but I also mean the imaginations that people have about what olam haba is, which is all like rooted in the physical. Like the cases that we didn't read, but that the Rambam goes over about people who think that olam haba is like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of like, rivers of chocolate and infinite candy, yeah, right. So is it really, are we really saying it's So essentially, it's that people can't relate to what it's like to know something, to want to pursue knowledge for its own sake. And because they don't have that experience, they can't relate to that as a valid end in and of itself. And once you take that away, then, or once you say that all of the physical or psychological pleasures and rewards are not why we're doing it, but we're doing it for this thing, this Lishmah thing, which they can't relate to as a benefit, then they're like, what do you mean? There's, like, that's pointless. Yeah, right. Okay, that's a clear idea of what it is. So really, so let's just summarize what we have here. Really, and I'm going to bring in an anecdote. I know I've told this anecdote last year, but it's worth repeating here. That at the what year was this? At Rabbi Zimmer's, the weekend of Rabbi Zimmer's wedding in Seattle. Then it was that weekend, and then the day after the wedding, then Rabbi Chait gave a Q&A at my alma mater, at my high school, Northwest Yeshiva High School. And since it was the day after the wedding, then Rabbi Chait had lost his voice. So yeah, he was talking in this very like hoarse Godfather-y type voice. And the best question that was asked in the entire Q&A, and I have a recording of this if you want it, is this one girl said, "What is the purpose of life?" And Rabbi Chait said, "All right, I'm going to answer this question, but I don't want anyone to leave the room before I'm done answering it. Ready? There is no purpose of life." and then he explained what it meant. I'm not going to do the whole voice for the entire thing. Is he said that when people ask what is the purpose of something, what they're looking for is some reason to justify the thing's existence. So I don't know if Rabbi Chait gave this analogy, but I'll give you the analogies. If I gave you like a little like machine, like a handheld machine, and you said, "What does this do?" And I said, "Oh, it doesn't do anything." You'd say, "Well, then it's pointless." Because when it comes to kalim, then you look for something that you need something to justify its existence. You need a function to justify its existence. Its existence itself, if it's a kli, is not justifiable if it doesn't do anything, So what Rabbi Chait said is when you look at the Perek Rishon of Bereshis, after everything God created, he said, V'yar Elokim ki tov, that God saw that it was good. And then when he saw the entire universe, he evaluated it, said, it's tov ma'od. And what that means is that existence per se is good, that there's no good in order to fulfill X, Y, Z. Existence per se is good. You don't need another reason to fulfill to justify your existence. However, that only works for everything else other than man, because everything else exists. When you say exists, so you tell a plant exists, the plant doesn't have a choice whether to exist. It just exists the way it's programmed to exist and sustained by God's will. Animals, planets, stars, whatever, it exists because of God's will. But man is the only creature that can go against God's will and can choose to not actualize his existence, or to live as something contrary to his existence. Like you could either live like an animal or you could live like a malach, but either way is going to end in disaster because that's not how you were built, or like Ayn Rand says, man has one choice, to be a rational human or a suicidal animal. That if you try to live like an animal, that's going to end up leading to your destruction. What do you call it? So it's easy to say existence itself is good for all other creations, but for man, you can't just sit there with your eyes closed in lotus position existing. You need to actually actualize your own existence by perfecting yourself and by aligning yourself with God's will, which is going to mean both using the Torah as the regimen to lead to true success, and then also using your mind and your decision making in areas that the Torah doesn't legislate to like live a maximum human life. And so really that's a fancy way of saying perfection, but it's a different concept of perfection because it's saying really existence itself is good, but human beings need to actualize that existence. And what we're saying by Lishmah is actualizing your existence, And the Rambam himself put it in those terms. That's what we read, is he said, Adam b'koach v'naseh Adam b'fa'al. You used to be a potential man, and now you're an actual man through gaining knowledge, because that's what your essence is, gaining knowledge. So that's what Lishmah is learning Torah for its own sake. Why? Because that's what it means to be human, and that's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that in some shiur we quoted. If you've learned, maybe it was Q&A. I don't know. If you've learned a lot of Torah, then don't take credit for yourself because that's what you were created to do. Yeah, it was related to your question, but yeah, that's what you're created to do. Like plants are created to take in water and sunlight and nutrients, and then to yield according to their kind. So are animals. Human beings are made to know things. That's what we're designed to do. So that part is fine, and that's what Lishmah is, and that's why we do it, and that's ein tachlis emes al ladashu emes. And then does that explain va mitzvos emes v'lechein tachlis am kiyumam? Right. So I don't know what it means. The mitzvos are emes, but tachlis am kiyumam makes sense because the mitzvos are designed to facilitate you living as a tzelem elokim. So the purpose of the mitzvos, doing them for their own sake, means doing them in a manner that leads to their results. Mitzvos are a means to an end, but if you're using them as a means to some other end, like to kavod, that would be shalol lishma. But if you're doing a mitzvah for example, if you build a ma'akeh to prevent people from getting injured in your house, and you do it for that reason, I'd say that is lishma, because that is how ma'akeh was designed to fit into the realm of human perfection. Yeah. I just don't know how mitzvos emes. Emes is emes is just a weird adjective to use for mitzvos. Even if you didn't want to translate emes as true, you want to translate it as real. That also doesn't fit smoothly. That's the only part that doesn't sit well with me. Okay, but we have explained the phenomenon. We have explained the wording. And then going to the problem of what does the Rambam hold about the Hamon? So I just want to read one more statement. We're not going to read the whole Perek Yod in Hilchos Tshuva as much as I'm tempted to do so, but I think that would just take us too far afield. But I do want to read when he talks about the Hamon in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Yod. Perek Yod halacha. Unfortunately, it's not easy to find the halacha in there. It is, let's see here. Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, let's look at the halacha hey. Yeah. Actually, we could do halacha hey safely without getting drawn into the whole ovin me'ava, ovin me'ira thing. Got it? Anyone who's involved in Torah in order to receive reward, or in order to not get punishment, that is being involved in it not for its own sake. But anyone who involves himself not out of fear and not to receive reward, but because of the love of the Lord of all the earth who commanded it, then that person is involved in it lishma. See, that's without lefikach, right? But he quotes that. Memra. Okay, then here's the halakha I wanted to get to. Lefikach, therefore, now here's the lefikach. Well, this really is the lefikach. When a person, when we teach the children, the ignorant children, women, and men, we only teach them to serve out of fear and to receive reward until their minds mature and they become wise with exceeding chachma. We reveal this secret to them little by little, slowly and slowly. And we accustom them to this idea gently, until they understand it and know it and serve out of love. I know, right? Go slow. Yeah. So the question was, right. Yeah. Just expand the muscle a little bit, a couple more steps. Yeah. Right. Now, and to make things more difficult is like this, it seems like conceptually there is no middle ground between Lishmah and Shalol Lishmah, right?
I don't like to call it.
Right.
At one point, I got on me, like, oh. Yeah.
Right. So what is this slow process of getting used to it? If in practicality, it sounds like you can only, either you're doing something as a means or as an end. You can't do, it's not like a percentage thing where, well, I'm doing it 60% as a means and 40% as an end, and then just get slowly more and more, Yeah. Right. Okay, right. So let's take that step, right? So rationally, it's either a means or an end. But emotionally, we know that you can have multiple conflicting emotions, right? Either simultaneously or sequentially, or IFS. So I think that's going to have to be the answer to this question of how can you do it ma'at ma'at? You have a possibility? Yeah.
Just because you need to get to a certain point before you can make the switch and just not off to that point.
Oh, that's another thing, right? Is that maybe the process of, meaning maybe there is a leap to Lishmah, but the process of getting to that point is a slow, gradual process. Oh yeah, that's right. The Megalin Lehen Razeh is interesting. Right. The revelation has to be ma'at. Yeah. It's funny. So what that also sounds like is when the Rambam said in Chelek that the Chazal encouraged the Hamon to pursue out of reward, and yet Antiknos Ish Socho said, don't be like masters who don't be like servants who serve the master with intent to receive reward, but be like servants who serve the master with intent to not receive reward. That would be like an example of the ma'at, which could clearly go wrong, but like that's just exposing them to it a little bit. Yeah.
So I often I guess
Yeah.
Right. When I'm saying that rationally, right? We're taking this as rationally, there's no like
middle ground. Right. There's no middle ground rationally. Right.
That continuous around with muscle and internet when gradually that
Right. Right.
And color, right?
Yeah.
When the person already like, oh, I want color, and not doing it for my reason. And you know him at that point is the one that's formed, and already I don't know where like that as ultimate good. But if I go, wanting tangent ideas of the ultimate good,
yeah.
That's not like emotionally, it's not as mean.
Right. Right.
But if you're on like a higher level of like things like that, then mentally
right. So let me just summarize what Chaim is saying, which I think pairs with what Yosef is saying, is that from candy to money, let's say, then there are gradations, that go along with it. And the kid is objectively not capable of grasping the good of learning for its own sake at that time. But the question is, why did the Rambam stop at the example of kavod? So presumably that is the highest level before Lishmah. And at that point, he is constitutionally capable of doing something Lishmah. It's just that there's another motive that looms larger in his mind, that is actually like, motivating him at that time, So the ma'at ma'at really occurs up until that point. But now the question is, what happens? How do you go? Let's just try to flesh this out. How do you go from kavod to what do you call it, to Lishmah? Yeah. Right. I have an answer, but yeah. No, go ahead. Okay. So, all right, appreciate it. Thanks. I'll just wait. Yeah. So I credit this answer to an English book I read from Rabbi Norman Lamb on Torah Lishmah according to Reb Chaim of Volozhin. I've not seen this inside, and it's either Reb Chaim Volozhin's pshat on Torah mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, or if it's not a good pshat, I think it's a true drush. Okay, so the drush that he said, and I know I've quoted this before, but it's worth repeating, is so we learn mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, that from shelo lishma you'll come to lishma. But Reb Chaim of Volozhin interpreted it as in the midst of shelo lishma there will be a lishma, like mitoch b'nei Israel, or b'toch b'nei Israel, or mitoch etz hagan, So what does that mean? What that means is every human being, by virtue of having a tzelem elokim, will be able to be involved in the truth for its own sake. Okay. However, I shouldn't say at all times. A little kid's not going to have that, maybe. But every human being has had the experience of being involved in knowledge for its own sake. Okay, where you're not thinking about anything else, you just seek truth. Okay, and even people. Oh, and so what this means is that the way you should set up your learning is you be involved in knowledge, not for its own sake. And the more you do that, the more you're going to maximize exposure to these moments of Lishmah, which happen and which you then attach to and seek out, and it becomes more and more and more prominent. Like I'll give you an analogy and then I'll give you an example. Let me just give the analogy and example first. So the analogy is the Rambam uses this for Nevuah, but in the Hakdama of the more Nevuchim, but he says like the Nevi'im got Nevuah at different levels and different frequencies. And so he says, it's like if you're at night in pitch black and there's a storm, and some Nevi'im got one Nevuah in their whole life, and that's like there's a flash of lightning and then they see everything illuminated and then it's all dark again. Other Nevi'im got repeated flashes, and then Moshe Rabbeinu is like constant flashes where it's like he's in daylight. And then other people got one flash and that's it. Other people have like glowing gemstones where they can like see in front of them, but that's it. So if you use that analogy, the Rambam, I think, uses this analogy for Lishmah and Shalom Lishmah, if I understand him correctly, where let's say you're a kid, and here's transitioning to the example. You're in school. The only reason you're in school is because you're forced to do it, okay, or because of grades. Sure, I guess so. Oh, I thought you were offering. Let me pause this. Okay, so what do you call it? So a kid is in school because he's forced to be there, okay? And maybe he's motivated by grades. Now, both of those, being forced because you don't want your parents to punish you, or doing it for grades, is slow lishma. But what happens, and again, I've seen it time and time again, is this kid is only in class because he has forced to be in class. But then you start discussing an idea in Mishlei, right? And the kid slowly becomes interested in he wants to answer the question, or he wants that idea, and he's forgotten why he is in there in the first place. Meaning he got there because of low lishma reasons, but right now he's in a lishma mode. And then as soon as the bell rings, then he goes back to his low lishma, But what you're doing, or let's say the person who's seeking kavod, okay, wants to pursue knowledge in order that they're called rabbi. But when they're learning Gemara, they get involved in like the knowledge, and they start to become attracted to the knowledge itself, and then they go back to Shalom Lishma. So what you're doing is you are creating maximum exposure to Lo Lishma, with the knowledge that based on the fact that you're Tzelem Elokim, you will have these Lishma moments, and those will be like flashes that get brighter and brighter and more frequent. And then eventually you seek it out for the Lishma itself. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Just happened was a study for about like a math test, and I guess it's sort of have been caught up on this problem. It's just, at this point, just one.
Yeah, right, exactly. Not for the grade. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Right. Yeah, that is exactly. A success. You're a success story. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll give you the best example, and I got permission to share the story. My first chavurah in yeshiva when I came here only came to. So my chavurah was not raised religious, but he was in love with so he was from Seattle, and he was in love with another girl from Seattle, and they've been dating for a couple of years. And so she came to Stern here, and he only came to yeshiva so that he can like continue going out with her. Okay. And this was back when the rule in the dorm was you had to be learning 2 Siddharim a day in order to live in the dorm, and he wanted to live in the dorm. So he would learn, he would do his 2 Siddharim a day, and then he would like go out with her, Yeah.
Wait, so the girl who went to Stern, he went to here from New York?
Yeah. So he could be in New York. Yeah, because he lived in Seattle. So he was here, and so he was in yeshiva, and and I think this was like maybe like 5 or 6 months into yeshiva, and I remember we were watching a movie in the hour before night seder, and we were watching in someone's room, and my chavurah kept on like looking at his watch. I was like, and eventually I was like, "What are you looking at your watch for?" He's like, "I'm waiting for night seder to begin so I can start learning." And then he just had this aha moment. He's like, "Wait a minute, why am I waiting? I could just go learn now," And what had happened was he had initially come to yeshiva just for the Lishmah of being able to go out with his girl. And then over the months, he had become attached to learning. And he set up this rule for himself: I'm only going to go to the minimal amount of Siddharim, And then eventually, it switched over without him realizing it, and he found himself like this in this absurd situation where he was actually attached to learning Lishmah, and he just hadn't dissolved his his schedule. It was like witnessing someone coming online, like you're describing, Chaim, but like realizing that, oh yeah, I can learn Lishmah. Yeah. So that was a good thing. Yeah. So Magalan Lahen Razeh, to answer your original question, of we educators, that's who he's talking to, reveal it to them slowly by slowly. It's a hard thing because I think what happens if what were to happen, and we've kind of answered this already, but what would happen if you just told someone to learn Lishmah before they were ready for it? So they just wouldn't do it, okay? And I think there's an even greater danger though, which is that if you made too big of a deal about how Lishmah is the only valid reason to learn, then they're going to they're either just not going to be motivated, or they're going to invalidate their low Lishmahs. You can't prematurely wean yourself off of your low Lishmahs, because that could be destructive to your learning. I mean, maybe that's the same thing as saying they're not going to learn, but I'll give you an example. There was definitely a problem that I've gone through, and I've talked to other people who've gone through this, where what Lishmah is, but you resent yourself for still being attached to low Lishmahs, and you try to undo your low Lishmahs, or you feel guilty about them, and then your learning suffers. You got to be careful to not do that. And if your hashkafa, if your whole worldview is dependent on the low Lishmahs, like these people who are doing it for reward, and you take that away, so then that could destroy their whole foundations of their emunah, that could be even worse, So the Magal Lahen Razeh Ma'ad Ma'at, how do you do that? Can we get any more, like you're saying, can we get any more particularity in the guidance? We described what you're trying to accomplish. What you're trying to accomplish is exposing students to moments of Lishmah and keeping this idea of Lishmah at the forefront.
What I was saying before, the Rambam
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Right. 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 So you, let me just make sure I'm getting what you're saying clear. When the Rambam told us what Lishmah is, and now he's going to go and talk a whole thing about what Olam Haba is, that is doing what the Rambam just said, is he exposed us to the secret of what Lishmah is. And then the people who read the Rambam, who are not on the level to do Lishmah, they're just going to focus on all the Olam Haba stuff, and they're going to focus on Pirkei Avos that says one moment of pleasure in Olam Haba is greater than all pleasure in this world combined, and they're going to be attracted to that, and but he's planted the seed of Lishmah in there. And not only that, I would argue that, I'm arguing this based on some experience, is that when a kid in high school asks what Olam Haba is or what reward and punishment are, they're asking because they want it, okay? But then when you get into the sugya of Olam Haba and reward and punishment, then they start learning that Lishmah, they become involved in the topic itself, So even this whole Chelek thing, this is very meta. It's a very meta, inauguration into the world of Lishmah and Shalom Lishmah that the Rambam is doing, because he started off by just saying it's a Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba. Oh, you want to know what that is? I'll tell you. And then he goes into this whole long discourse, and the reader of the more Nevuch or of the פירוש משנה is going to get drawn Lishmah into this and get the sampling of what Lishmah is. And then when they're done reading it, they'll go back to their little Lishmah motives, but they'll have like moved the chess piece forward like one step, Yeah. Margilin also, I think, is an important thing. Margilin has to do with hergel, which is habit. There is and he says Margilin le'inyan zeh benachas. You accustom them to this idea benachas. And I think like the example you just gave with your father of like there is a certain experience of like where you're learning with people. Let's say you're learning with your Rebbe or your father, and there's like this pausing and reflecting on like, this is fun, isn't it? And there's a recognition this is a different kind of fun than like, I don't know, like eating, drinking, playing video games, like, and that's like being margil them to this inyan, which is not going to have a tangible physical benefit or removal of harm, Yeah. Achiyasiguhu vida'uhu v'yavdu me'ahava. Yasiguhu is understanding the idea, and yeda'uhu, I don't know what the difference between yasiguhu and yeda'uhu is. To be masik something is just to have the concept, I think. Meaning, I do think that there is a process of grasping what the concept of learning for its own sake is, And I do think, for example, that in, America or in the Western education system, there used to be an idea of that, of like learning something for its own sake. But nowadays, when going to college is so tied to getting a job for so many people, a lot of people just are never exposed to the idea of learning for its own sake. So like even grasping the idea is one thing, but then actually like understanding it and then being able to do it is a different thing. Like, is it going to be on the test? That's the refrain. If it's not going to be on the test, then what's the point? Yeah. Okay. Is that good? Oh, good. I feel like we got clarity more so than we had before. So it's always worthwhile going through this. And in fact, let me just read Hemi and פירוש משניות just for 1 second. Oh, thank you. I just want to read. I don't have this on the screen, but at the end of the פירוש משניות, the words ring true all the time. The last paragraph of the הקדמה to Chelek, the Rambam says, "Ukvar ha'arachtu b'dvarim ma'od." I've gone on at length on these matters a lot. V'yatzasi mi'inyan ha'chiburai, and I have gone beyond the bounds of my chibur. Ela sha'asisi kein lefi she're'isi shezeh tachlis be'emuna. I did this because I see, sorry, to'elas be'emuna. I've seen that this is a great benefit in matters of belief. Lefi she'ani asafti lecha devarim ravim mo'ilim u'mefuzarim bechiburim ravim b'gedolim. I have gathered for you many beneficial ideas that have been scattered through many compositions. Haya behem mu'ushar. Okay, fine. Heye. I don't know what that means. Okay. V'chazor al devarai ele pa'amim rabos. Review my words many times. Okay. V'his bonu behem heitev, and contemplate them very well. V'im tashle osach machshavta. If your thoughts seduce you, shekavar hayvanta inyanav mipa'am achas o eser. If your thoughts like seduce you, trick you into thinking that you have understood these ideas the first or the 10th time, Hashem yodea, God knows, shebesheker hishalta osach. God knows that you have been seduced falsely. Okay. Al tamaherbo, don't be quick in reading this. Lafisha ani lo kasavtiv eichshin damin. I didn't write this as it happened upon me. Ela achar hisbonus v'yishu v'das v'iyun v'deos nechonos v'biltin nechonos. I wrote it after much contemplation and deliberation and investigation into ideas that are true and ideas that are false. V'sikum ma shetzarech lahamin mahem. Ubiruru batanos varayos al kol inyan v'inyan, and I've summarized for you what you need to believe, and I've sorted out the arguments and the proofs for each and every idea. And I ask that Hashem guide me on the path of truth. So he's saying that you don't think you got this the first or the 10th time, read it again and again and again. And that's why I introduced this by asking, like, does anyone mind if we go over this again? Because I feel like every time I go over it, I get new ideas. Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. We didn't answer one question, which is the Tchilas Dina Shel Adam. Connecting that. Yeah, Lefikach thing. Oops. Yeah. Hold on, let's go back to that. Right. So beginning of a person's din is only on learning and afterwards on the rest of his actions. Okay, well, maybe we said this already, but we said what we added today is that the all of today, like for everything, is that why is the Tlias Dinush Adam on Talmud? Because that's Kizel Kol Adam. That is the purpose of man. So your primary din is going to be on being a good human, right? Not being a good actor, a good doer. So Lefikach, you should prioritize learning for its own sake and truly perfecting yourself. Yeah, we do have better. I think verbally it's going to be the same as before, which is that this is the purpose of man, and the only way to get to the purpose is by being involved in it, not for the right reasons, and therefore you should be involved in it. But now the understanding is better. Yeah, now we know what it means. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, good. Let's do this. Let's read the next thing and raise the question so that tomorrow we can work on it. Okay, so this is halacha, Perek Gimel halacha vav in Hilchos Talmud Torah. Mi shenasa'u libo l'kayim mitzvah zo karoi. La. Hold on, I'll tell you the in a second. V'lios mukhtar b'kisur shel Torah. And someone whose heart motivates him to fulfill this mitzvah properly and to be crowned with the crown of Torah. All right, stop there. Okay. Right when we started off, when the Rambam talked about the crown of Torah, we asked the question, what is this doing here? And I theorized then, this is here because just like the Rambam talked about the mitzvah in Perek Aleph, the bare minimum level of the mitzvah in Perek Beis, which is the Tinokos Shabeis Rabban, so too it makes sense for him to talk about the highest levels of the mitzvah here, And that's what I said for Halacha Aleph, that if a person is going to want to fulfill the mitzvah on the highest level, this is what you should do. But the Rambam only says that in Vav. So in other words, I don't think that answer that I gave is sufficient for Aleph through Hey. Meaning, sorry, not Vav. Yeah, Vav. What did we just read? Yeah, Gimel Vav. Yeah. In other words, what I said for all of Perek Gimel, the Rambam is saying starting at Vav. That if you want to fulfill this mitzvah properly, this is what you should do. So I'm saying that my theory is no longer good, that this explains all of Perek Gimel. What? The sheet, yeah. Oh, sorry. I got it. Perek Gimel?
The question we had originally was why is the Rambam
Yeah, with Kesser thing, and there that's where I said this answer, which I do think works for Vav, but not for Gimel now.
The answer that now he's telling you what it has in the
Yeah. In other words, I'll tell you where I would put Vav according to my answer. I would put Vav right after Aleph, or right after Aleph 2. I would say he introduces with the 3 crowns, tells you that maybe you'll say that these crowns are bigger than Torah, but really they're not. Torah is bigger than both of them. And then say, if you want to fulfill this mitzvah on the highest level and get the crown of Torah, this is what you should do. And then you have Beis through the end of the parak.
Isn't our saying, that when they do not have it,
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to unify that. That's true. It's the greatest mitzvah and of most importance.
Right, even the enemy is half of the volume.
Right.
That's the whole point.
Right. So maybe you can say that that's all just right. Okay, that's a good way to say it. Right. So in other words, so really this is answering a question that we didn't really answer. Like, what is the Kesser Shel Torah? Kesser Shel Torah is that which makes which is the purpose of man, and that's all and therefore of the highest priority, and that's all Aleph through Hey. Okay, good. Then he says, and if you want to succeed in prioritizing that, this is what you do. Okay, that's a good answer. By the way, I just saw something out of the corner of my eye right now. Look at what Rav Makbili says on Vav, the footnote of Vav, Karoi La, Klomar La Torah, not Karoi for you. Right. Yeah. But what does this mean? Shehi hakol uba tali hakol biladeha ein meuma. That's Lishmah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if he wants to. In other words, like I thought the way I read it when I translated it was like someone who wants to fulfill this mitzvah on the highest level. which is vague. He's saying someone wants to fulfill this mitzvah and like do it justice. Like he's putting it in terms of the mitzvah or the Torah. Yeah. In other words, let me say that better. He's not saying someone who wants to reach the highest levels of Torah. He's saying someone wants to fulfill this mitzvah on the highest level, like to do it justice. I don't know if there's a nafmin. I'm just saying. Okay, so what should you do? Lo yasiach da'ato l'dvarim achayim. Do not distract your mind with other things. V'lo yasim al libo sheyikne Torah im ha'osher v'ha'kavod ke'achad. Do not make it your goal, take it to heart, to acquire Torah with wealth and glory together. Kahu darka shel Torah. This is the way of Torah. Pas b'melach tochel. Eat bread with salt. The al ha'aretz tishan. Sleep on the ground. V'chaye tzar tichya. And live a life of pain, of suffering. Uva Torah ata amel, but toil in Torah. V'lo alacha kol amelacha ligmor. V'lo ata ben chorin libatel. The work is not upon you to complete, nor are you free to desist from it. Im hirbesa Torah, hirbesa sachar. But with if you've increased Torah, then you've increased reward. Sachar lefi atzar, and the reward is according to the punishment. This is like 4 Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos, I think, all crammed into one, right? Pas b'melach tochal is one Mishnah in Avos. Lo alacha kol melacha ligmor of lo ata ben chorin libatel is the second Mishnah. I think in hirbesa Torah, hirbesa sachar, I think that's another Mishnah, and definitely lefum tzara agra is another Mishnah. Yeah, I think we need to see what the Rambam says on those things. But just before we even look that up, what would you say the main message is in this parak here? Yeah, but what it sounds like to me is that one line that he said in the it reminds me of the line that he said in this in the Hakdama to the Mishnayos, this line here. That the destruction of the soul comes at the building of the body, and the building of the body is at the destruction of the soul. That basically you can't do both. If you have to. Yeah, that. And everything else he's quoting here, I think, is in line with that you're going to need to make tremendous physical sacrifices in order to build up the nefesh, in Talmud Torah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is funny because there are indications from just reading the plain shot of the Torah that you could get both. Like you're going to get brachos, you're going to get bim malachim mimlochu, orchaim bimino osher ubismolo osher v'chavod. Like there are things that indicate that you can get both. So that is something we have to reconcile. But I got to go today because I had to reschedule my tutoring from yesterday till today. All righty, so to be continued tomorrow. Lee Netter.